Dear Governor Ron DeSantis, my name is Rebekah Mitchell. I am a single mother living in Saint Augustine, Florida since October the 15th of 2020. I can honestly say this has not been a comfortable experience, yet I have come to love Florida and have decided to make it our home. Coming from Virginia is quite a bit of a culture shock because there are so many more walks of life here and many more opportunities for the children. Yet you and I both know this is not the world that we grew up in. You and I are not much different because we both are fighting for change. You are fighting for a better world for you and yours to live in, as well as I am. That is the reason I have reached out to you today, because I need you to hear my story. When you have briefings and announcements, we are always there to listen and happy to do so. Yet now I need you to take a moment and listen to me. Although it is my story, I'm going to tell you I am speaking out for many. I have learned many things since I have been here, and I have risen spiritually to levels that some will never even know or could even begin to understand. And I do believe wholeheartedly you know what I mean. One of the major lessons that I have learned came from my 11-year-old son, and that lesson was to simply stop fussing about things that need to change and be the change yourself. And that's what I intend to do, Governor, is to be the change and be heard so that maybe I can be the ripples in the ocean to form waves throughout our state, and maybe if God sees it fit, throughout the entire world. I know you are a very busy man, and I will try my best to keep this letter as short as possible, so I do not take up much of your time, but I urge you to please read it word for word. Because in this world full of fake and false actions and people, I assure you, I am as real as they come, and so is the story I'm about to tell you. Please allow me to start by giving you a quick summary of my journey to Florida and how my life has changed. I've lived in Virginia most of my life. I was born and raised there. My children were also born there, and I was in a relationship with their father for 11 years, who one day decided that we needed a change. And I knew we needed a change, so we moved here to Florida. We did not come without knowing anyone. We did have family here. My little sister had moved here with her family. But within 3 weeks of relocating and still yet not a place to live, or even me a job, my partner of 11 years wakes up one day and says he's leaving. I was still trying to get the children enrolled in school at that time, and I had to take my daughter to the doctor for a physical. He left that day and lied to his children and said he was sick, but he couldn't go to the doctor here. He had to go back to Virginia. Yes, it's a lame excuse, but it got him out of Florida without too many tears from his children, because they were under the assumption he was coming back by Thanksgiving of 2020. He never returned and went on with his life, and that's pretty much the end of the story of him, except for the ripples that he left, and I was alone with 2 children, and we ended up homeless. Please believe me when I say what I'm about to tell you. I have taken every experience with gratitude, even being abandoned by my partner, because I believe wholeheartedly God opened doors for me, and each struggle that I have been through and I am going through is shaping me into the person I am meant to be. I will say to you, I am not a victim, and I do not have a victim mentality. I will never be a victim of any type of circumstance, for we all have freedom of choice, no matter what hell comes upon earth, or what any government official or system say, because it is our God-given rights. And this statement leads me to tell you about the system, and as you already know, how broken it really is. I will start from the day that we had to start reaching out for help, to not join the rest of the homeless in the woods. I started reaching out approximately a week before I knew that we were going to have to leave from where we were staying at. I was directed to the St. Francis house, only to find out that they did not have any rooms available. Yet even though they did not have rooms available, I explained my situation, and I was directed to call back every day in the morning because they never knew if someone was going to come back or not. I did that every day and continued looking for other means in which I was not successful for. And my son had said something to someone at school, and I was directed to talk to someone through a crisis program there. And on the last day that we had, I drove around waiting for an answer. I remember that day praying to God that my children would not have to sleep in a car, which would have been much better than in the woods with no tent. Then when I thought things was hopeless, my phone rang, and the program had given us a few nights in a motel room, so happily I accepted. Those days in the motel room, I kept calling every morning like I was directed to do so at St. Francis House. The evening before we had to leave the motel room, I received a call from the St. Francis House, and I was directed to come in the next day and do intake paperwork. I was so relieved, of course, and I showed up on time and began the intake for the children and myself. Once we were in St. Francis House, I attended another meeting for a program that was going to help locate housing for me and my children. So from that point on, we began the journey of looking for a place affordable, or at least manageable for us. I did not have a traditional job because of my children only had me, and there were heavy rules at the St. Francis House, and I had no child care. Throughout the entire time that I was at the St. Francis House, I drove for DoorDash and did a few vacation rental cleanings. After months of patience wearing thin and searching for a home and filling out endless amounts of paperwork, we finally found a place that the program expected to be okay and helped us get inside the home. The major thing about finding a place to rent in Saint Augustine is the high cost, including to get inside of a home with your first month, last months, and of course, the security deposit. The home located for us was the cheapest available at the time and was $900 a month, which cost $2,700 to get in. That is more than I make in a month's time. Not to mention utilities must be turned on, with additional costs of security deposits. Backing up a bit, the first initial costs are usually application fees with no guarantee one will be accepted, ranging from $50 to $100, with sometimes extra costs per person in the family for background checks. The reason I am elaborating on this is to let you understand that when a person is homeless or they are without means, this step alone at the very beginning of rehoming families is the reason many fail in establishing a residence, or in layman's terms, a home or place to be or belong, and not be tagged as homeless. We lived at the St. Francis House from January 2022 until June of 2022. I had signed the lease at my current residence in May of 2022, but we did not get to move in until June of 2022. This was due to repairs needed that were made by the previous resident who occupied the home. Upon the signing of the lease, the program Care Connect that I had went through to help acquire a home also at that point inspected the place. Even though the place was not finished, they went ahead and approved the inspection in hopes of getting my family inside of a place ASAP, only with the understanding that things were going to be completed very soon. Here it is now, almost a year into living inside my home, and some of these things have not yet been completed. An example, no electricity on one side of the house, and properly working air conditioning, not to mention some repairs that have occurred and never were attended to, such as the roof and ceiling leaking and cracking. I was very excited to be able to get into a place, to have our own privacy, and to be honest, to be able to take a shower and use the restroom in peace. When we were at the St. Francis House, my children had to be on my heels at all times and never left in the room by themselves, and that included taking them to the bathroom. Even though that I am a woman and my son was 10 years old at the time, they still wanted me to take him with me no matter if it was a personal issue or not. My son was not even allowed to stand outside of the door, making it very difficult being a woman. The rules were set in place for safety issues, yet it was not an ideal situation, but it was better than being on the streets. If you broke these rules, you were kicked out with no exceptions. We lived at the family center of the St. Francis house upstairs, in which it had 4 rooms with bunk beds, 1 bathroom, and a shared kitchenette. One of the rooms did have a very large bathroom and 2 bunk beds rather than 1, and I was allowed to stay in it for a week because I raised the issue of my son going to the restroom with me and I needed privacy. Yet it was taken away for another family with a smaller child who ended up only staying for a night and then leaving again. I was grateful just to be in a place, so I did not raise another issue. I did the best that I could. There were inspections daily to make sure the rooms were clean, the beds were made, and there were no items that were not allowed inside the room. They went through all belongings that were in the room to make sure that there were no weapons, medications, or any drugs. This was a good thing mainly and needed within the homeless society. However, you did not have the freedom to even have ibuprofen or Tylenol for headaches. And if their children were prescribed any type of medication, they had to report to the office when it was open in order to just take it. The rules were very strict, but also understandable and needed. However, living and tagged as a homeless person inside of the St. Francis house was not much different than I would imagine it would be to being incarcerated, only that we were free to go and come if we checked in at lunchtime and by 5 p.m., and we had to be in bed and lights out by 10 p.m. This made it very hard to maneuver the kids back and forth to school and for me to work as a parent and try to make the funds to even get ahead. I was under the understanding when I got my place that I, along with others who had already received it, would get a type of grant to help us with furnishings because most of us didn't have anything but our clothes that would fit inside of a tote, which that one was a clear tote per person. Care Connect did help us acquire and pay for our last month's rent and security deposit, and they also went as far as paying for us a futon, bunk bed, and myself a bed. I waited for the St. Francis house to give the grant that I was promised. I was going to use it for purchasing cookware, towels, and the basic furnishings our house needs. I was told a week, and when I went back to check on it, they said the paperwork was sent back because they had forgotten to fill out an area, and they would call me. I waited and heard nothing. When I went back to inquire about it later, I was told that they did not know what I was talking about, and I don't get anything. They only provide the place to stay. I knew that I was lied to because there was a family who lived across the hall from us who acquired a home and acquired the grant to be able to help furnish their home. But I let it go, and it was okay because the kids and I managed. Piece by piece, I was able to buy silverware and other things that I needed. I knew in my heart that money was used for something else, but it did not matter because I had a place for my children to lay their heads and a place they could call home. The homeless trauma was over for them, or at least I thought. I continued to work daily supporting my children until I had a previous hernia repair to strangulate. I then had to go to another emergency surgery. In order to keep my bills at bay, I had been working 7 days a week for as long as I can remember. Naturally, having surgery, I couldn't work. So I was out of work the days that I was in the hospital. And then I was under doctor's strict rule of not working or even driving at all for 2 weeks straight. Of course, that really hurt my financial situation in many ways, considering I had no other income and no child support. Naturally, I got behind on my bills, including almost $1,000 rent. Also had a car payment that I was paying every 2 weeks. I was behind on every bill that I had, and when I was finally able to gradually go back to work, I never really got caught up fully to where I was in a situation to be able to maintain my bills comfortably. I was turned down by almost every resource that I turned to. The surgery was in the later part of 2022, so I continued to play catch up for several months. Then by November of 2022, I had ended up acquiring my nieces and nephew from CPS. An incident had occurred and it required the parents to not to have physical custody of the children. When I picked them up, I was under the impression that it was only going to be for a week. But a week ended up being several months, and during this time, I had to miss more work because it required me to be physically present with the children. During this time, I received no financial help at all. I expressed this to the caseworker, and they themselves told me that there were no funds and no one would help. I had to miss work many times going to pick up one of the children for behavior issues at school. I was made to feel as if I had to choose between my children and their well-being and the children I cared for. Again, I took the children in so they would not become property of the state, and it was pushed heavily if I said no or I could not do it, that they would be taken away and put into homes. As their aunt, I felt obligated, and of course, my heartstrings were pulled on because being in the state's hands is no place to be for children. I expressed myself many times with the issues that I was having financially, and I needed help, but I was always given a piece of paper of resources only for them to tell me they had no funds and they can't help me, or I do not qualify. So I continued as far as I could go until finally we came to an arrangement that the children could return home to their parents. I received no help, food or otherwise, from the parents or from the program that placed them with me during the entire few months I had them. During this time, I experienced an immense amount of stress because it was only me financially and physically taking care of my 2 children and 3 other children. I was being pushed by the property manager to hurry up and get my rent paid. Not to mention, I have my car payment, insurance payment, phone payment, and I had to acquire groceries some way. During the time of the children's stay with me, it was almost like I was the one who did something wrong, and I had to comply with all of these rules as if I was the one on probation. I had to stop what I was doing on certain days at a certain time and have a meeting every week with caseworkers. Their program did nothing but enable the parents because the parents did not have any children to tend to or financially be responsible for. But at the same time, they wanted the parents to prove themselves as parents. But they were not allowed to be with the children without me present, so therefore, I had to not work and create time for the parents to be with their children and tend to their children at my home. I'm sorry, allow me to rephrase that. Parents, as in singular, because the father never did anything. Their mother, which is my sister, would come in the evenings when I was home and feed the kids and cook if necessary. I was the provider for myself, my 2 children, my sister, and her 3 children during this time. So again, I was in another situation to where I felt and was made to feel like I was in the wrong. In between my surgery and taking in the children, a tree fell on the house I was renting. It knocked the electricity out and the meter box off the house. I was without power for several days and I had to end up paying for a motel room. Again, there was no help there to receive. During the time I was taking care of the children, I started feeling bad, and the more stress that I had, the worse I felt. But I kept going until the whole left side of my body began to tingle and go numb. I waited until the children were in school to go to the hospital, only to find out that I had been having multiple strokes. I ended up signing myself out of the hospital against the doctor's recommendations simply because I had 5 children at home and no child care. It was several days before I could return to work to get myself back together, enough to function appropriately. It was very hard for me to even put words together, and I couldn't feel the left side of my body. This was my breaking point, and I finally had to choose between my family or appeasing the system. So when we had our meeting for that week, I spoke my piece and I presented to them my situation and what I chose. And I also presented to them another option. But whatever they decided, I had to have just me and my family back in my home, because clearly no program was going to help me financially by any means. So they agreed to keep me on as a safety monitor, but they would try to place the children back in the home with their parents, and I would inspect daily the well-being of the children. And this is where we are still at today. They reach out to me every week, usually on Friday, to see if there are any concerns within the family and the children. So now I'm at a point where I am forced to reach out for help again. I told you that a tree fell on the house and caused us to be without electricity. Something obviously got crossed up when they hooked the electric back up, because the last bill I paid was in February, and I kept checking back to see my bill, and it said a zero balance. So I reached out and they told me it was correct. Then suddenly, I wake up to an FPL bill of $888. I am to the point that I'm just going to accept things as they are, because obviously the system is so broken. They can't see someone who really needs help if they have slapped them in the face. I had to take another half of the day off to reach out for help and spend 5 hours of getting documents and filling out paperwork through the DCF, only for them to call me and tell me straight up that they don't see how they can help me. Again, they do not have any money at all, no funds at all. But however, there is a program that if I can prove that my hardship within the last 30 to 60 days max, and that it was caused by COVID, they might could pay 1 month of my bill. But this only depends on me finding another program to pay the rest, and then coming up with a persistent income to show that I can do it myself. This is very disturbing. It hurts even. So I'm supposed to lie or come up with a way to make my hardship look like it's due to COVID, when my hardship is due to me being a single mother, lending a helping hand, and being forgotten about as if I'm nothing. This is just my story. This is only a very small increment of my struggles. And what hurts worse is when your neighbor has all their bills catered to them every single month, when literally the local prostitute has no children to care for, has a caseworker delivering food and every need at her beck and call, including her rent, and a single working mother cannot get help for no reason, but if she lies and creates a story of COVID hardship, she could possibly get just a little bit of a nudge. This is sad, embarrassing even, and when I say the word prostitute, I don't mean it lightly, because it is the truth. Everyone locally knows, and even the caseworker does, but I am told there is no help for me. I need to get another job that pays more money, just like it's that simple to be able to fit another full-time job with the 3 I already have into a 24-hour day, or I need to create a COVID hardship. I am going to let you judge whether I am worthy to be helped or not. But my point is, I am not the only one suffering in this hell. The system has been placed for failure, not improvement. The issues with the home that I am renting go so much deeper than just me. If you go through the system like I did, tagged homeless, you are treated like a dog and no longer human. They will take you off the streets and place you in a kennel just long enough to place you in a house and chain you up, because there is no way of getting ahead and no way of getting out of the system. All you do is work for someone else. The system is broken and it needs to be revamped, and it needs to start at the beginning and work your way up. You can't just throw someone into a house who has nothing with rent that is sky high and expect them to pay it. Never attend to the root of the problem without looking at all aspects of a person's situation. Most of the homeless don't even have cars or transportation. There are no programs that help you with such. Why do you think most homeless turn to drugs? It's so they can escape the reality of their existence that the system has created for them. No, I've not turned to drugs and never will. But there's many people not as strong as I. And they're good people, and they're caught up in a world that they do not even know how to navigate. The system makes people think that they are helping when really they are enabling their help. I know many homeless people, Governor, and they are not all bad. When I first come to Florida, I seen a few homeless flying their signs on corners here and there. But in the past couple years, the homeless has quadrupled. and they are living in the woods and under bridges because they have given up and can't make enough money to sustain themselves in a doghouse. Some kids have even been taken, and they have been deemed as unfit parents. Just to be able to put these children inside a system that has another system that ruins lives, while pretending to be some sort of heroic measure for the children. The parents can't bear the pain of the loss of their children being taken away. What else is there for them to do when they're treated like they are nothing and feel like they're up against the wall, and there's nowhere else to go, no way to get out of a system, and nowhere to belong? Drugs become the next best thing to exit, the next best place out of this world, only if it's just for a moment. The feeling and the euphoria of relief to forget seems to become the next best solution, and the feeling is what becomes a habit. And sometimes they want to stay away longer, and so they will double their dose of this euphoria, and sometimes triple it, so they never come back. If you have an invasive plant, what do? Yes, you can just cut it down, and it will be gone for a while, but then it's going to grow back, but thicker than ever before. The only way to completely and permanently weed out that plant is to pull it up by the roots. And that's exactly what we need to do, is to get to the root of the problem in the homeless society by taking each plant from its root. Maybe my story isn't worth your time. Maybe you have more important and bigger things to do. But I want to remind you, my dear Governor, I am important, and we the people are important, whether we are homeless or not, because even the homeless thought you were important enough to place you in office along with myself. I am not the only one who's crying out for help. Your people need a solution to a major issue that keeps escalating. We need laws enforced that get people off the street permanently and in some type of self-sustainability. I know you have struggled too, and you have the whole state plus on your shoulders. I personally think you've done well. Not many could walk the path that you have, sir. However, I assure you though, not many people can walk the path that I have as a single mother of two either. Maybe not even yourself. I do not know where my little family and I will be when you read this. In this home or on the streets, only God knows at this point. But I promise you, whether you are part of the collective that helps make a change for permanent solutions or not, I will be. Most people in my situation, even in the small community that I live in, are afraid to speak out. They know that if they complain about the sewer running on the ground, and if they complain about having no heat or air conditioning, or their ceiling getting ready to fall on their children's heads, that they will no longer have a place to live. Because it's almost impossible to get into housing, and it makes it much worse when a landlord gives you a bad reference. So they will keep quiet, and they will keep being punished and put through hell, no matter what they must do to make money to survive. In their minds, there's no limit, only a must to keep going back to the streets. This will stay silent, no matter how much they are beat down, abused, and misused, just so they can prove to the system they are a good parent to keep their children, and they will secretly step out of their reality and leave for just a moment as soon as the drug dealer drives by. This, my dear Governor, is the reality that is hiding around you. This is happening in your state, and we are all human, yet some of us, especially those with lower incomes, are not treated above cattle or dogs. The system has gained ultimate control by planting the seed of fear. And until we can show the greater majority that fear is simply false evidence appearing real, it is our duty to help see an alternative and live a much healthier and happier life. I know it seems rather far-fetched, and it's not going to be easy to induce change, but nothing great ever is. And out of my 41 years, I have learned that nothing is impossible. I had 3 separate doctors tell me I would never have children, but it took only God to say, and it was so. He gave me a gift of both worlds, a son and a daughter, and my responsibility is to leave better children for our planet. That is something I intend to do, but also my responsibility is to leave a better planet for my children. It was once whispered to me by a divine being that I could not see and who I identify as God. Something remarkable and truer than anything we have ever known. The whisper said, "The wisest man nor woman knows absolutely nothing apart from who they truly are. I know who I am, Governor, and the woman I am destined to become. How about you? Do you know who you truly are? And are you willing to learn who you will become?" We both have other people than ourselves who count on us to make the right choices, and we both know the choices we make will send ripples and create waves in the lives of others. How big the waves become relies upon our voice and how many ripples we create. I personally now only have the power to use my voice, yet one single command has moved the mountains and parted the seas. Imagine what the voices of many can do. It can create miracles, and that's why fear was planted to keep silence. I am very sorry to have taken up this much of your time, and I am truly grateful that you have created the time to hear my voice. Change will come no matter what choices you and I make. Yet the question is, what type of change can be influenced by the sounds of our voices? I lay my family circumstances in the hands of God, and I will continue to move forward. I believe wholeheartedly I was led to write you this letter to help induce change, and no matter if my family and I end up homeless again, if the time spent induces a positive change for others, I will gratefully continue to struggle and be the voice for others who is scared to speak. If you see this letter through email, I am truly astonished and grateful for you taking the time to read this out of the hundreds of emails you get. If you are reading this on paper through the postal service, days has been several since I wrote this. If you are seeing this on social media, it's because you never responded, and I do not know if you have seen this. My objective is for you, Governor Ron DeSantis, to personally read this letter because it is you personally who must make your choice in the voice that you raise. I wish you and yours so much love and happiness, health and prosperity. Again, thank you kindly for your time and dedication to us. Most importantly, thank you for all you have done, are doing, and will do for us, we the people. May God always be with you. Sincerely yours, Rebekah Mitchell.
For updates and more stories from Rising Collective, like, subscribe, and follow.